can I ask Robert Wiren to come here to make the final presentation? He's someone really very close to our minds and hearts. Don't worry. He's a true friend of Somaliland, and just he want to share with us, I mean, the work that he did for Somaliland. Please, welcome.
Good evening. I have the heaviest task to maintain you awake because it was a very long day. Well, 25 years ago, Somaliland decided to recover its independence after a lopsided union with Somalia, as Jon Lewis had described it. As a journalist focusing on Ethiopia and the Horn, I got more and more interested about Somaliland and its original political evolution. My first visit in Hargeisa was in 2002, and later I returned 2 other times to Somaliland. While representative institutions were built step after step in Somaliland, no similar progress could be witnessed in Somalia, despite financial and military aid given without much control by the international community. And above all, full recognition has been granted to a non-elected government unable to control more than a few blocks in Mogadishu. This strange situation became an incentive for me to publish a book 2 years ago in order to explain. This is a book. I have some, for those who are interested, you can buy it. So I wanted to explain how a country like Somaliland is ostracized. No book in French had been published yet about this country. Recently, I've been asked to contribute to a periodical published by an NGO in Brussels. This issue, published last month, is devoted to Somaliland. I would just like to summarize the main points of my contribution to this magazine. Well, there are 2 great risks to maintain Somaliland as an unrecognized entity. That is 1, destabilization attempts by Somalia, and 2, economic stagnation, growing poverty, and religious radicalism as a consequence. First, Somalian nationalism and its temptation to revive the Republic of Somalia. While people and organizations opposed to Somaliland consider that recognition would create tensions in the Horn of Africa, it's likely that it is the status quo which is going to provoke more problems. After so many failed roadmaps, international action in Somalia has obtained no credible results so far. But Western blindness has encouraged Somalian politicians to believe that Somaliland belongs to them, for they are still intoxicated by the failed ideology of Great Somalia. After the Arta conference in 2000, the Swedish scholar, now departed, Bernard Helander, produced an analysis asking, will there be peace now in Somalia? That's 16 years ago. He wrote, quotation, "The political culture of Somalia has a built-in shortcut to overcome fragmentation and division. Assign a common external enemy and you will pull together the many strands of fragmented political reality." End of the quotation. This is exactly what is happening again. Somaliland's independence is a disobedience that must be put straight. But since Mogadishu has not yet gained enough political and military strength to provoke an open conflict, this government has decided to give no chance to the Somaliland-Somalia talks using stalling and provocative tactics. By buying time, Somalian politicians think that it will be possible to force Somaliland back in a new kind of a union under the cover of federalism. To undermine the position of Hargeisa's government, several attempts have been made, like direct contact with some Somaliland elders and with people of the Khatumo group. It's also disturbing that ministers who resigned last October had links with the Dam al-Jadid faction, which has infiltrated the Somalian government. There is a paradox about international intervention in Somalia. The intention was to help rebuilding this country, but the way it's being done creates the conditions of new conflicts. And this looming conflict is due to the fact that the African Union has taken side instead of being a mediator. Furthermore, with the naive acceptance of Western powers, Turkey has been entrusted with a mission to facilitate talks between Hargeisa and Mogadishu, but at the same time, Ankara is helping to build Somalia's intelligence service and armed forces. In this context, African Union is an obstacle to Somaliland's recognition. Non-African countries wash their hands of this problem since they are waiting for Africans to decide first. But despite the positive report of African Union's fact-finding mission in 2005, no decision came. Well, it's because the majority of African countries do not feel that Somaliland's case is urgent. Somaliland is too quiet. And there are so many problems to tackle in Africa, South Sudan and Burundi being the most recent ones. One must not forget the influent Arabic lobby opposed to your country. 65.5% of the African Union budget comes from 5 member countries: Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Only the latter one has expressed some interest for Somaliland. Nigeria is confronted with violent separatist movements like Boko Haram. And we should mention also that some African leaders who are not fond of Somaliland's kind of democracy, because they accept election only if it allows them to stay in power without limitation. What about non-African actors who could maybe have an influence on the situation? More than 90% of the programs implemented by African Union, border program, Great Green Wall for the Sahara, scholarships are funded by non-African countries. The European Union is subsidizing AMISOM. These donor countries could have some influence on the continental organization concerning Somaliland, but they are afraid to be labeled as neo-colonialist. So the perspective of recognition remains bleak. Now, my second point, the danger of Salafi radicalism. Islam is the religion of Somaliland, and its religious traditions have always been linked to Sufism. But signs of a rigorist approach of religion can be seen when women do not use anymore the traditional colored dirah and prefer dark abayas or niqabs, while men wear khamis, the Saudi tunic. Salafi influence came through Islamic NGOs. And because of the troubled environment of your country, the state budget gives priority to security. Thus, an important part of the education sector is left to private initiative, often funded by money from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. This is the way Salafi influence is infiltrating Somalian society. According to a scholar, Dr. Hussein Bulhan, there is not yet an organized political Salafi movement in Somaliland. But as it has happened in other countries, the danger could come from the failure of the democratic system, with growing centralism and a tendency to authoritarianism. And of course, non-recognition and absence of development would cause more and more frustration among the population. Unemployed young people deprived of future would easily fall prey to Islamist activists. I did not mean lecturing this assembly, who is well aware of the present situation. I just wanted to give an example of contribution to better information to a French readership about problems which could endanger Somaliland if the status quo is going to last. Sorry. Let me conclude with this quotation. For both Somalia and Somaliland, separation is viable in that there is no economic interdependence between them. But an enforced union against the will of the majority would become a serious liability, possibly leading to war. An internationally sponsored referendum based on the right to self-determination in the exceptional circumstances that underlie Somaliland's case should commend itself to the international community. End of the quotation. This has been written in 1994, 20 years ago. It was written by John Drysdale in his book, What Ever Happened to Somalia? With subtitle, A Tale of Tragic Blunders. Shall we wait again 22 years and watch more tragic blunders? I thank you.